My mom slipped a gold necklace into my 15-year-old daughter's bag and got her arrested for shoplifting. My dad gave a false statement to police claiming he saw her steal it. I found her crying at the police station. I didn't shout, I did this. 3 days later, my mom was speechless. My dad was screaming. My name's Tessa Morgan. I'm 38 years old. I'm in the dining room of my parents' suburban house during our crowded Sunday lunch. The air is thick with the smell of roast chicken and unspoken resentments. My daughter Ivy sits to my left, her posture perfect even at the table. My husband Mark squeezes my knee under the floral tablecloth, a silent signal of support. A sharp knock at the front door stops Forks midair. Two uniformed officers step inside, their presence sucking the warmth from the room. My mom, Gloria, goes stiff, her fork clattering against her plate. My dad, Victor, rises from his chair, his voice already starting to boom about loyalty and family business. The officers say they're here about a necklace and a false report. My sister, Daphne, turns to me, her eyes narrowed. "Fix this," she hisses. My niece, Mallory, just hides her face in her hands. I look at the officers, my voice steady and clear. "The person you're looking for," I say, "is already wearing bracelets, just not the metal kind yet. Before I tell you how we got to this moment and why my own family tried to wreck my kid, tell me where you're listening from. Drop your city and country in the comments. Subscribe and switch on notifications for more true-to-life family revenge stories. Now here's how I turned silence into consequences. My ordered life is built against chaos. I wake up at 5:30 before my alarm even has a chance to whisper. The first thing I do is make coffee, letting the familiar scent fill the kitchen while I check the calendar hanging on the fridge. School drop-off, a dentist appointment for Mark, and a board meeting for Ivy's Police Explorer program. Everything has its place, its time. I like bills paid the day they arrive, laundry folded and put away immediately, promises kept without reminders. These aren't just habits, they're walls I built on purpose, brick by careful brick. I run our home like a clean engine, no leaks, no loose bolts, no surprises. Surprises are just problems that haven't announced themselves yet. Mark and I are a team. We split the household chores without speeches or scorecards. We just do what we say we're going to do. He handles the trash and the lawn, I handle the budget and the schedules. I track our spending in a simple spreadsheet, every dollar accounted for. There's one line item, a recurring transfer, that I never talk about with him, though I know he sees it. He trusts me to handle it. I keep my voice calm, my tone even, especially in front of Ivy. People who don't know me well call me strict or too serious. I just call it safety. When my phone buzzes with texts from the family group chat, I've trained myself to scan the messages, take a deep breath, and keep moving. Reacting is what they want. Responding on my own terms is what I do. Ivy is 15 and she's crisp with purpose. She's obsessed with rules, but only the ones that make sense, the ones that are fair. That's why she loves her Police Explorer program so much. The structure, the service, the neat, predictable order of goals, it's a world that clicks for her. She says she wants to go into criminal law someday, to stand up for people who get steamrolled by a system that doesn't listen. Her uniform hangs in her closet, ironed and perfect, the creases sharp enough to cut paper. Her binder for the program is a masterpiece of organization, its colored tabs glowing like tiny traffic signals. She trains twice a week, running drills until her face is flushed and she's breathing hard, and then she comes home and reviews her notes at the kitchen table while I make dinner. She has an innate respect for lines. What's hers, what's not, what's right and what's wrong. It's not a rigid thing, it's a quiet, deep-seated sense of fairness. Before she leaves the house for anything, she triple-checks her backpack, water bottles, snacks, wallet, phone. Nothing extra, nothing she doesn't need. I watch her sometimes, the focused set of her jaw, and I think this is the life I wanted to build for her. A clean life, a fair one, a world where the rules protect you instead of trapping you. On the first of every month, an automatic transfer for $1,200 leaves my bank account and lands in my parents' account. It's been happening for 6 years without a single missed payment. That's 72 months. $86,400. I call it support. They call it what a good daughter does. I log the transfer in my spreadsheet without comment. Sometimes Mark raises an eyebrow when he glances at the screen, a silent question in his eyes, but he trusts my choice. He knows there's a story there, one I don't like to tell. That money is for peace. Or at least, that's the story I tell myself. It plugs the holes I didn't make. A utility bill that's suddenly past due, a mysterious car repair, another one of my mom's emergencies that never quite has a clear explanation. Every time I authorize the payment, I feel lighter for a split second, like I've bought another month of quiet. Then, for the rest of the week, I feel heavier, weighed down by the knowledge that I'm not fixing anything. I'm just patching a bad foundation. My rule with them has always been simple. They don't ask me how I'm managing it, and I don't ask them exactly where the money goes. It's a transaction built on silence, and it's been the cost of admission to my own family for a long, long time. My mom has this incredible talent for making wrong things seem adorable. She calls her stealing quirks. A little knick-knack that ends up in her purse is finders keepers. Taking something without paying is just a case of no harm done. I've seen her palm little trinkets in souvenir shops, her movements as smooth and practiced as a magician's, all while smiling warmly at the checkout clerks as she walks right out the door. As a kid, I learned to recognize the signs. Her breathing would get a little faster, her eyes would get a little brighter, and she'd put on a mask of wide-eyed, fake innocence. She'd catch my eye and give me a tiny wink, whispering later, "They mark it up so much for suckers," as if that justified it, as if she were the smart one outsmarting the system. On the rare occasion she was caught, she'd dissolve into a puddle of gushing apologies, blaming her forgetfulness or a senior moment. She could spin a story so fast and so convincingly that she'd often walk out with the item anyway, usually as a gift from a flustered manager who just wanted her to leave. People call her fun, spontaneous, a real character. I call her dangerous, especially when she's bored. When I tried to set boundaries as a teenager, she called me dramatic. When I gave in and played along, she called me her sweet girl. She never met a rule she couldn't dance around, and she always expected a round of applause for the performance. My dad doesn't steal. He just patches the leaks with lies and calls it love. He would swear on a stack of Bibles that he saw the sun rise in the west if it would spare Mom from a hard look or a moment of accountability. His voice gets big and booming when he feels cornered, but his eyes get small and shifty when the truth gets too close. Family first is his mantra, but he wields it like a club, not a shield. It means protect the family image no matter who gets hurt in the process. He taught us the code of silence from the day we were born. You keep family problems inside the house, you don't involve outsiders, you don't cause embarrassment. You certainly don't create consequences. We were a family that didn't resolve conflicts, we just hit a reset button and pretended nothing ever happened. He's a master storyteller, my dad. In his version of our family history, Mom is always the misunderstood hero, a free spirit hemmed in by a judgmental world, and the rest of us are just ungrateful for all she does. I survived that code not by fighting it, but by quietly stepping out of it. I built my own home with my own kid on a different foundation, the truth spoken plainly even when it's hard. The shadow appeared at the edge of what was supposed to be a good week. It started with a text from Mom. "Want to take my favorite granddaughter out for a treat this weekend?" "Just us three," Dad chimed in on the group chat a minute later with a thumbs-up emoji. Ivy's face lit up when I told her. She genuinely likes being seen by her grandparents, especially during the quiet moments when it feels safe, when it feels like they're actually seeing her and not some version of her they've invented. I said yes, but with my usual conditions: call me if the plans change and please have her home by 5. Then Daphne pitched a big Sunday lunch at their house to reconnect. I agreed, hoping for a couple of hours of quiet civility. The family group text started pinging with jokes about who was bringing dessert. I muted the thread after 5 minutes. A little while later, a picture popped up on my social media feed. It was Mallory, Daphne's daughter, smiling next to Mom, a selfie captioned, "Girls' Day with the best grandma." I felt a familiar prickle of unease, that old sense that a game was being played that I didn't understand. I didn't know it yet, but the fuse was already lit and burning fast. The ground beneath my carefully constructed world was about to break wide open. My phone rang, displaying an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. A calm, professional voice asked, "Am I speaking with Tessa Morgan, Ivy Morgan's mother?" My heart did a slow, cold flip. "Yes, this is she." The voice continued, flat and impersonal. "We need you to come to the mall security office. There's been an incident involving your daughter." An incident. The word was so sterile, so void of detail that it was terrifying. "Where are my parents?" I asked, my voice tight. "They're here," the woman said. "They're cooperating." Cooperating, the word hung in the air. My chest went ice cold. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, my movements jerky and robotic. "I'm heading out," I called to Mark, who was in the garage. "Something's wrong at the mall." On the drive over, the 10 minutes felt like an hour. I kept picturing Ivy's face when she felt like the rules were shaky or unfair. Her chin lifts, her eyes go hard, and she becomes very, very still. The security office was tucked away behind a plain gray door next to a stockroom entrance. The air inside was stale, smelling of old coffee and disinfectant, with the low hum of fluorescent lights overhead. A young staffer with a clipboard and a bored expression told me they'd found a $65 necklace in Ivy's bag. "My daughter doesn't steal," I said, the words coming out flat and absolute. The staffer just looked at me. The security tag was still on it. I walked into the small, windowless back room, and the sight of my daughter made my throat close up. Ivy was sitting perfectly straight in a hard plastic chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her cheeks were flushed a hot, angry red, but her eyes were dry. She looked up at me, and before she could say a word, I believed her. "I didn't put anything in my bag, Mom," she said, her voice steady. I nodded. "I know." Mom was fluttering around the room, full of dramatic sighs, saying it must be a terrible misunderstanding. Dad was standing by the door, already crafting his narrative. "You know how these teenagers get," he said to no one in particular. "They get confused, distracted." A store employee, Jamie Brooks, a young woman with tired eyes, calmly explained that the alarm had tripped when Ivy walked through the security sensors at the exit. Jamie gestured toward a small security monitor on a desk but said she couldn't let me view the footage without the manager's permission. Ivy repeated herself, her voice gaining strength. "I did not take it." Then she looked at me and asked, "Can I call my program coordinator?" My heart broke a little for her. Even in this mess, her first thought was to follow the rules, to report herself. "We're going to handle this the right way, Ivy," I promised her. "Not the family way." A mall security officer, a man with a tired mustache and a notepad, read a brief statement to me. It was from my father. He'd signed a written declaration claiming he had watched Ivy look at the necklace and then saw her slip it into the side pocket of her backpack. The air left my lungs in a rush. I turned to Dad, my voice barely a whisper. "You didn't see that?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at a crack in the linoleum floor, his jaw working silently. Mom was right there, stroking his arm, murmuring just loud enough for me to hear about the importance of telling the truth just to speed things up. The words felt like a physical slap. My own father had put his name on a lie that branded my child a thief. Ivy's lips pressed into a thin, white line. She stared at the floor, and I could see her chest rising and falling as she counted slow, deliberate breaths, trying to keep herself under control. I turned back to the officer. "We will be giving our own statement," I said, my voice as even and cold as I could make it. The officer clicked his pen and waited. I spoke clearly, stating Ivy's name, age, and that she denied the accusation completely. I made sure to request that he note her clean record and her active status in the Police Explorer program. On the outside, I was a pillar of calm. Inside, a storm was gathering, locking into place, and I knew with a terrible certainty that it was not going to pass. On the ride home, the silence in the car was heavy enough to feel. Ivy finally broke it, her voice a small whisper. "My program has rules, strict rules about detentions and anything involving property." She looked out the window, her reflection a pale ghost against the passing scenery. The review board can remove me. They can do it within 5 days if they believe I stole it. I reached over and put my hand on her knee. They won't, I said, my voice firm. Because we're going to bring them proof, not noise. I promised her we would fix this, and I meant it. That night, long after Ivy had gone to her room, I sat at the dining room table and read the Police Explorer Program Handbook from cover to cover. The language was clear and unforgiving. An accusation of theft, even without a conviction, could be grounds for immediate dismissal. The clock was ticking. I opened my laptop and composed an email to the program coordinator, a woman named Karen Doyle. I described the situation plainly, without emotion, and requested a meeting to present evidence on Ivy's behalf. Then I started a new folder on my computer desktop. I named it The Necklace. Inside, I created a document where I logged everything: the date, the time of the call, the names of everyone in the security office, exactly what was said and what was done. The 5-day countdown had begun, and I started moving like I had been training for this my whole life. The next afternoon, I asked Mom and Dad to sit with me at their kitchen table. It was the same worn oak table where we'd weathered 1,000 little family storms, the place where truths were spun, buried, or ignored. I set my phone face down on the checkered placemat between us. The recording was already running. There were no announcements, no dramatic flair. It was just a quiet, necessary precaution. I need you to tell me exactly what happened yesterday by the jewelry display, I said, my voice level. Mom let out a little giggle, the kind she used when she thought we were sharing a delicious secret. I didn't smile back. My face felt like it was carved from stone. If you tell me the truth right now, I said, looking directly at her, I can fix this for Ivy. If you don't, I won't. Dad immediately jumped in, his voice gruff. Tessa, we should just drop this. The store will forget all about it in a week. The program won't, I replied, my gaze never leaving my mother's face. The house smelled of lemon-scented cleaner and the stale, sweet scent of Mom's perfume. My stomach was churning, but I held my tone steady. I just waited. I tilted my phone just a fraction of an inch, making sure the microphone was pointing directly toward them. The silence in the room stretched out, thick and heavy. I repeated my question, my voice low and direct. Did you put the necklace in Ivy's bag? Mom's eyes, the same ones I see in my own reflection, shone with a dare. It was a look I'd known since childhood, the look that came right before she blew something up for the sheer thrill of it. You really think your perfect little kid never needs a lesson, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Beside her, I heard Dad take a sharp, sudden breath. It was a tiny sound, just a gasp of air, but it pinned the entire moment to the floor. That sound was his tell. It was the sound of him realizing she'd gone too far and that he was going to have to lie to cover for it. I didn't fill the space. I just waited, letting her words hang in the air between us. Finally, she broke the silence. She needed to be knocked down a peg, she said, her voice now flat and cold. She makes your niece feel small with all her awards and her perfect little life. My heart didn't break. It felt like it dropped through the floor and then hardened into a cold, heavy stone in the pit of my stomach. Mom called it balancing the scales. That's the phrase she used. She said Mallory had been upset after Ivy won her last award at the Explorer Program ceremony. She shrugged, a casual, dismissive gesture as if this whole nightmare was just a harmless prank. No one gets hurt, she said breezily. You go down there, you clear it up, and it's over. She talked about how she'd nudged the backpack, saying she'd done it barely, as if that small detail was supposed to comfort me to make it okay. Then she smiled, a tight, knowing little smile that didn't reach her eyes. Now she'll remember she's not better than the rest of the family. The cruelty of it was so casual, so breathtakingly selfish, that it took me a second to find my voice. I kept my tone clinical, repeating her words back to her to get it clearly on the recording. So you admit you planted it in her bag. I watched the words land, saw the flicker of annoyance in her eyes, that I wasn't playing my part, that I wasn't rushing to smooth things over. You can spin it your way if you want to be dramatic, she sniffed, or we can keep it inside the house where it belongs. Dad muttered her name, Gloria, a weak, pleading sound. Then he stopped, as if just saying her name could somehow stuff the truth back into the box she just opened. Thank you, I said, picking up my phone. That's all I needed. I ended the conversation like I was ending a business meeting. Dad must have heard himself on the recording in his own head, that sharp, guilty intake of breath, because he changed tactics in the middle of a sentence. He started blustering, his voice getting louder to cover the weakness of his words. Now, Gloria is just talking big, he insisted, waving a dismissive hand. You know how she exaggerates, nothing really happened. He started rewriting the story right there in front of me, suggesting that maybe Ivy had handled the necklace and then forgotten she'd put it in her bag. I cut him off. You already told the officer you saw her steal it. You signed a statement. So which is it, Dad? Did you see her do it, or did she forget she did it? He sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. He fell back on his oldest, most reliable defense. This is about loyalty, Tessa. You don't bring police into family business. I didn't raise my voice. I just repeated the question, letting it sit in the air. Which is it? He finally broke, looking down at the table, his shoulders slumping. He mumbled something about me not ruining Mom's reputation. I'm not going to ruin anything, I said, standing up. I'm just going to reveal it. The code of silence had a crack in it, and I stepped right into the gap. My phone pinged before I even got to my car. It was a text from my sister, Daphne. What did you say to Mom? She's really upset. I sat in the driver's seat and typed back a simple, honest reply. I asked what happened, and I recorded her answer. The family group chat exploded. It was like kicking an anthill. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly had very strong opinions. You always put family over strangers, one wrote. Don't make a scene, another added. You're supposed to handle things like this quietly. I didn't type a single word for 12 long minutes. I just watched the same tired sentences circle like vultures, the same old arguments for silence and sweeping things under the rug. Daphne texted again, this time a warning. You're going to regret taking this outside the family. I finally replied, my thumbs moving with cold precision. I'm not taking it outside, I'm taking it to the truth. Someone in the group then joked, look out, Tessa's the cop now. That was it. I muted the thread again. I took screenshots of every single message and dropped them into the folder on my computer. My phone felt hot in my hand, but my mind was ice cold and clear. That night, I sat on the couch with my laptop. I opened my banking app, navigated to the automatic payments screen, and found the recurring $1,200 transfer to my parents. I pressed cancel. A small pop-up asked me to confirm. I did. It was over. I sent a short text to Mark, who was reading in bed. I'm done paying for the hole they keep digging. His reply came back instantly. I'm with you. Then I sent a message to the group chat with Mom and Dad. It was short and to the point. The monthly support payments have been stopped. Do not contact Ivy. Mom's reply was immediate. A single crying emoji followed by a long paragraph about betrayal and how could I do this to my own mother. Dad called twice. I let the phone ring both times, then I blocked unknown numbers for the rest of the night. I went back to my banking app and moved the $1,200 from my checking account into a savings account I had just renamed Ivy Future. I leaned my head back against the couch and took a deep breath, the first real one I'd taken all day. My first attempt to fix this quietly hadn't worked, but it had given me the one thing I needed most, a lever. When Mark came downstairs, I laid out the entire timeline for him, my voice low and steady in the quiet house. The call from the mall, the soulless back room, Dad's statement, the recording I'd made in the kitchen, and finally, cutting off the money. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting, his expression growing more grim with every detail. When I finished, he didn't offer opinions or tell me what he would have done. He just asked, "What do you need from me?" The question was so simple, so solid, it almost made me cry. "I need a copy of that store video," I said. "I need a written statement from the manager clearing Ivy, and I need a plan that works." He nodded. Okay, I'll handle meals, school runs, and any noise from the family. You focus on the proof. We agreed right then on a strict no-contact rule for Ivy with my parents. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. I sent a quick text to Ivy, who was in her room. We believe you 100%. We're fixing this. Get some rest. She replied with a single red heart emoji and a period. A statement, not a question. We set our phones to do not disturb, allowing calls only from each other and Ivy. Our house became a fortress. It was quiet, it was sturdy, and it was on my side. I went back to the mall the next morning while the air was still cool and the parking lot smelled like car heat and last night's fast food. I asked at the customer service desk for the security office and they pointed me down a corridor that smelled like cardboard and bleach. Jamie Brooks was there, same tired eyes, same plain polo shirt, and when she saw me her face schooled into something neutral. I told her who I was and why I was there without theatrics. She didn't flinch. That steadiness was the kind of quiet help that makes a difference. Jamie said she remembered the alarm and the little cluster at the jewelry display. She told me the sensors at that exit were temperamental, which was the kind of detail that sounded boring until she added, "But we log the beeps. Time, who passed, which door." She wrote times on a scrap of paper and slid it toward me. The timestamp matched what I already had in my notes, which made my chest loosen a notch. She explained the tag hadn't been cut out of the necklace, the alarm had tripped because the tag was still on the item. That was a simple fact I could show anyone who'd listen. She told me she couldn't hand over footage herself, that had to come from the manager, but she pointed me to Nolan Reeves, the weekday manager who kept the back office keys. Jamie gave me his name and said he was straightforward. "If you want to clear a kid, come in clean and ask for the 12 to 12:30 clip," she said, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "We'll look at the camera that faces the display and the one that catches the exit. If someone touches a bag, it's usually clear enough." Her voice didn't have drama. She was offering a path and the details I needed to walk it. I thanked her and put her note in my folder. Walking back to my car, I felt the small, exact relief of someone else pointing to a fact I could prove. Jamie had been the kind of ally you don't expect in a place where so many people would rather move on. She'd done something quiet and helpful, given me a way to match what I'd recorded at home with something from outside the family. It was the kind of ordinary, unspectacular evidence that had teeth. I drove home and started my next set of calls. Nolan Reeves met me in a back office that smelled like packing tape and coffee. He was even gentler in person than Jamie had been over the phone. No rush, no drama, just business. He queued up the footage on a small monitor, and for the first time I saw what the cameras had caught. The picture was grainy, the colors washed by fluorescent light, but the motion was clear enough to make my stomach drop and then steel itself. On the screen, Mom moved like someone rehearsed at a puppeteer's table. She leaned in close to the jewelry display and then to Ivy, her shoulder brushing as she passed. I watched her reach not a dramatic snatch, but a small, deliberate hand that slipped into the side pocket of Ivy's backpack. Ivy was looking at a rack 2 feet away, unaware, fingers tracing a necklace by the display as if she were choosing a necklace for a friend. The camera that faced the exit caught the moment the security sensor chirped as they walked out. For a second I couldn't breathe. For the next second I was cataloging every second like it was a list to check off. There was also a shot of Dad standing with his hands in his pockets, eyes not fixed on the group but darting away. He seemed distracted, not watching anything closely. It wasn't dramatic evidence of guilt so much as a record of where attention was directed. The timestamps matched Jamie's notes and the alarm log. Nolan zoomed in on the frame where Mom's hand made the small, precise move. It wasn't cinematic, it was ordinary, the kind of thing a camera's eye notices that a human eye might rationalize away. When I asked for a copy, Nolan's face went neutral. "I can't just hand that over," he said, "corporate policy. You need to submit a formal request and we'll provide it. If you give me the dates and times and a short reason, I'll push it through first thing tomorrow." He slid a small form across the desk, simple, no legalese, a place for my name, the date, and a brief statement. I filled it out right there, fingers steady, and attached the slip Jamie had given me with the times. Nolan nodded, took the paperwork, and said he'd sign a manager's letter too once corporate cleared the copy. I'll put it in writing. Alarm tripped, tag on item, video shows contact with the backpack, he said. His tone was pragmatic, which felt like mercy. I left the office with my stomach tight but my hands full. Nolan's promises were the kind of small official weight I needed, someone in uniformed retail confirming what a home recording had captured. I drove home, logged the meeting, and added the name Nolan Reeves and the time to my folder. Then I wrote my own note, request submitted, manager to follow up. It felt like stacking blocks, one piece of proof placed deliberately on another. That afternoon, I drafted the letter I was going to hand Nolan. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd recorded Mom, and wrote in plain language. No accusations, no flourish, just facts. The date we needed, the time range, the description of the event, and a clear ask for a manager's letter stating the alarm had been activated because the item's tag had not been removed and that video showed contact with the backpack. I printed it on the nice paper out of habit. Small gestures matter when the rest of the house still believes style equals sympathy. I went back to the store with the printed letter tucked under my arm. Nolan read it, penciled a tiny edit to clarify the timestamp, and then said he'd sign it that morning when corporate opened. He didn't promise a rush job for drama's sake. He promised a clear, plain statement he could stand behind. He told me he'd keep the copy in the manager's file and would email me a scanned version as soon as it was signed. The way he handled the request, methodical, careful, not personal, felt like the kind of help that didn't ask for anything in return. As I left, I put a copy of the draft into my folder and emailed myself a timeline summary. Nolan Reeves agreed to sign a letter, footage request submitted, expected response by morning. I added Jamie Brooks's note too, and then I backed everything up twice. The folder was starting to look like a dossier. Small, clean, and undeniable. I felt less like a parent flailing and more like someone building a case out of facts. Then Daphne called. Her voice came through sugary and sharp at once, the way people sound when they're trying to keep a blow-up from becoming an all-out war. "Tessa, I heard what you did. You can't be serious about dragging outsiders into this," she said, words that were meant to shush me into compliance. I told her calmly what I'd found and who had promised to help. I explained I wasn't trying to make trouble for Mom, I was trying to save Ivy. "You think Mom would do that?" she asked, disbelief carefully stitched into her tone. When I repeated what the footage showed, she inhaled like she was holding a position that would collapse if she let go. "Gloria was just trying to level things for Mallory," she said, choosing words to soften the blow. "She wanted Mallory to feel seen, you know how she gets dramatic." Her loyalty felt like a physical thing, something that held her tight and made every step away from Mom an act of betrayal. She warned me too in that same breath. "If you take this outside, you'll regret it. Family will turn on you. We don't air laundry with police." Her phrasing was the old code, protect the family image, contain the mess. I could hear the warning in her voice and the fear underneath it, the real worry about consequences, not just legal but social. "I won't embarrass Mom," she said, and the plea was more fragile than the accusation. I said nothing about the recording or the footage. I said only, "I'm not trying to embarrass anyone, I'm trying to tell the truth so my kid doesn't lose her future." There was a long pause on the line, a breath that sounded like a small surrender. "Just be careful," Daphne said finally, and I heard the split in her loyalty. Part of her defending Mom because that's what she'd always done, and a smaller, quieter part of her wondering if the defense was worth the cost. She didn't promise anything, she didn't admit anything. She only warned me and then hung up. Her warning didn't sway me. If anything, it sharpened my resolve. Daphne's voice clung to the old rules, but I could feel the ragged edge where those rules were starting to fray. I added the call transcript to my folder and exhaled. The people who'd been raised to smooth over harm were still out there, arguing for silence. I'd chosen the other side, truth even when it hurts. Word spread like a bad rash. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years sent single-line judgments. Tessa, why make this public? And family over strangers always. An aunt called to cry about reputation and loyalty. I let it go to voicemail and saved the message in my folder. A neighbor who'd always been too friendly suddenly turned chilly when she ran into me at the grocery store. Someone started a private chat about protecting grandma, and Mallory's friends began tagging innocent, snide posts about drama queens. I screenshot everything. I didn't argue, I documented. The clock was a low, constant drumbeat under everything I did. 4 days until the program review, 4 days for Whispers to become a story that could ruin Ivy's future if no one stopped it. I kept forwarding updates to Karen Doyle, short, plain emails, evidence pending, manager's letter incoming, request for meeting. She replied with a single line of encouragement. Bring what you have and we'll hold the hearing until the board sees it. That little line felt like a lifeline. I drafted a 1-page summary that night: what happened, who said what, the times where video and audio could be found. I kept the language simple because facts don't need pretty words. I printed copies and placed one in the folder I carried everywhere like a talisman. Sleep came in 2-hour chunks. I would wake, think about a timestamp, make a note, go back to bed. On the third night my eyes felt raw, but the plan was clear: collect, secure, and present. The pressure from relatives was noisy and constant, but it couldn't touch the thing I held in my hands: evidence. When Nolan Reeves emailed the signed manager letter the next morning, I drove to the police station like a woman carrying something sacred. The station smelled like coffee and paper, and the desk sergeant pointed me toward a plain office where Detective Samuel Price took the paperwork without fuss. He was all business in a shirt that had seen better days, small creases at the eyes that made him look tired but steady. I handed him a neatly labeled USB drive, the audio recording, a printed copy of the manager's letter, and my 1-page timeline. I kept my words short and clean. There's an admission on that audio, I said. There's video that shows contact with Ivy's backpack. My dad also signed a statement that's not true. He plugged the drive into a laptop and listened to Mom's voice. I watched his face as the first minute rolled by: interest, then a tightening, then quiet. He hit play again, listening to the same stretch twice. Clear enough, he said finally, and I felt something unclench in my chest. I told him where Mom and Dad would be for Sunday lunch, gave him the address, and said the family was gathering at noon. He asked if I wanted to be present when they spoke to them. I said yes. He explained they'd compare the manager's letter and the footage to the statements already taken and then decide next steps. He didn't promise anything dramatic. He promised a careful, factual review. Leaving his office, the file felt less like a private burden and more like a document that could protect my child. Karen Doyle met us the afternoon after I turned the evidence over to the detective. I brought Ivy with me because she needed to hear the facts spoken plainly by people who had the power to do something. We sat at a rectangular table in a bright room with a water pitcher and paper cups. Karen looked at Ivy and said, "I want her to tell us what happened in her own words." Ivy did, steady and exact, saying she didn't put anything in her bag and that she'd been with Grandma and Grandpa. I handed Karen copies of the audio, the video, and Nolan's signed letter. I kept my explanation concise: what I recorded at home, Jamie's notes, Nolan's promise, and the timestamps. Karen read the manager's letter, glanced at the timeline, and then at Ivy. She folded her hands and said the board would not act on gossip or hearsay. She said they would review the materials and hold the review until after they'd seen everything. That promise loosened the pressure inside my chest enough for me to breathe properly for the first time in days. Karen asked Ivy a few polite questions about her training, her record, and how she handled the situation. Ivy answered like the young woman she is, calm, precise, and clear. Karen thanked her for coming in with facts, not emotion, and said the board would meet the following week. We left with a date on the calendar and a sense that fairness still mattered. Daphne set up the group text for the Sunday lunch, calling it a family talk to set things right. I accepted the invitation and told her I'd be there at noon with Mark and Ivy. The tone in her messages swung between honey and threat. She wanted everyone present so they could talk to me and fix things. I replied privately to Detective Samuel Price with the time and address and asked if he could be available that day. He confirmed he'd review the evidence and could send officers if needed. I told Mark and Ivy the plan: show up calm, take the folder if anyone asked, and don't argue. I chose a plain outfit, neutral sweater, no necklace, and left my wedding band on the sink to avoid giving anyone anything to notice. Mark promised to sit close to Ivy and to keep his hand on my knee under the table if things got loud. I rehearsed one line over and over like a prayer: I'm not here to argue, I'm here to show the truth. On the drive over Sunday, my stomach buzzed, but my hands were steady on the wheel. The folder felt like armor in the passenger seat. The plan wasn't about spectacle, it was about making the truth obvious and unavoidable. If the family wanted to keep secrets, they could make that choice. I'd made mine. I wrote a short, plain letter and left it on the kitchen counter for Mom and Dad to find. No drama, no speeches, just facts. No more monthly support, no more cover. Do not contact Ivy. Then I deleted their access to anything that touched our lives: shared calendars, emergency contacts, any automatic payments. It felt like ripping a strip out of an old script. I set the phone to record automatically on Sunday and tested it twice to make sure the mic picked up voices across a table. I backed up the audio and video files again, thumb drive, cloud, another thumb drive, until the copies felt like armor. I told Mark exactly what might happen: loud voices, accusations, maybe officers. He nodded and packed sandwiches into a small cooler like we were doing a picnic instead of walking into a family cross-examination. I told Ivy plainly, the sort of words she likes, honest and without flourish. They might try to make you small, I said. Say the truth, let me show them what happened. She kept her answer short, the way she always does when she's steady. We're going to be okay, she said. I believed her. The night before, I slept with the folder on my nightstand. It was ridiculous and practical at the same time: audio recording, manager's letter, printed screenshots of the footage, my notes. My fingers kept going back to the spine of the folder as if I could feel the facts through the cardboard. The old rules were gone: no more pretending, no more private fixes that only moved the harm around. I'd watched Mom make games out of other people's dignity for decades. I wasn't going to hand that power back just because the family wanted quiet. Sunday, I put on a plain sweater, no necklace, no charms, nothing that could be turned into a talking point. I left my wedding band at home on purpose. I wanted nothing about me to be a distraction. Mark squeezed my knee under the table when we arrived at their house, a small anchor. Ivy sat tall, her uniform jacket folded neatly on her lap like a promise. Daphne was already there, a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. The house smelled like gravy and lemon cleaner, the same mix as always, but it felt smaller somehow. We sat down to eat with the usual clatter of plates and small talk, and then Daphne tried the old line everyone resorts to when they think they can tidy trouble away. We're family, she said. We fix things inside. It was the exact sentence I'd heard 100 times growing up, an instruction, not a plea. I set the folder flat on the table and placed my phone screen up beside it, recording light blinking. Then tell the truth inside, I said. My voice was even. I watched faces tighten. Mom said I was being dramatic, the practice performance she used when she wanted people to think she was harmless. Dad called me ungrateful, his voice booming like it usually does when he wants to drown reason. I laid out the facts in plain words. I had an audio recording of Mom admitting she put something in Ivy's bag. I had video from the store showing Mom's hand near Ivy's backpack. Nolan Reeves signed a manager's letter saying the alarm went off because the tag hadn't been removed. No adjectives, no venom, just items anyone could check. I pushed the folder toward Daphne and said, if anyone wants to read it, it's all here. She stared at the folder for a long second and then looked away. I didn't expect applause. I didn't want it. I wanted truth. Mark kept his hand on my knee under the table. Ivy's jaw was set, the way it is when she's focused on a drill. Outside, somewhere down the block, a car alarm started and then stopped. It sounded like a punctuation mark. When the knock came at the front door, it landed like something final. We all looked up. For a second, the house was quieter than I'd ever known it. I put my palm flat on the folder and felt the weight of evidence beneath my hand. My rehearsed line, "I won't argue, I'll show you," unfolded into the moment like it had been waiting its whole life to be spoken. Two uniformed officers stepped inside with the kind of calm that has done this before. They moved without hurry and without spectacle. One of them asked, in a steady voice, if my mother was present by her full name. I didn't say her name aloud. I met their eyes and said, "She's right here." Mom gave a smile that used to charm people out of the trouble she'd started. Now it looked thin and practiced. I pointed to the folder and said, "There isn't a mistake, it's all in there." Dad puffed up as if the house needed a louder noise to cover an inconvenient truth. He started in on family business and loyalty, the old scripts that had saved him when he wanted someone else to shoulder shame. The officers explained, politely and without drama, that the report filed was not something they were going to treat like a private matter. They said they had to follow up just like any other report. I watched one officer reach for a pair of handcuffs and my stomach steadied, oddly. The bracelets I'd mentioned earlier were about to become metal in a different way. They stepped forward and asked Mom to put her hands behind her back. For a beat she looked blank, like someone who'd been nominated for a role and hadn't rehearsed the script. Then she hardened, a shield dropping over whatever expression she'd been using. The cuffs clicked softly, an ordinary sound that felt enormous in the small dining room. The room compressed into a terrible, tight focus. A cousin fumbled with a phone and filmed for 5 seconds, just a shaky clip, then lowered it like it was suddenly the most embarrassing thing she could be doing. Daphne's mouth opened and closed as if to form a question. Finally she whispered, near to tears, "Why did you do this?" Her voice came out small and raw. I watched Mom being led toward the front door, her steps oddly steady. Dad's voice had climbed and then cracked, the big man fumbling for the words that defended him while accusing me. "This is family," he yelled, a tired old defense. I met his eyes and said, quiet enough to be heard, "She did it to my kid." The officer beside me, unremarkable, patient, gave me a small nod, like someone who'd seen parents on both sides and still had faith in what was right. They guided Mom out onto the porch and then down the walk. For a moment I watched sunlight move across her shoulder like an ordinary Sunday. Then the front door closed. The sound it made was a long, soft exhale you only notice when everything else has gone silent. Inside the house, the air changed. Conversations faltered. People who'd been sure of their lines had nothing to say. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't apologize. I felt as if a door had been opened that couldn't be slid shut again. The house, which had always favored quiet over truth, finally let out its breath. The small sound of silverware being set down on plates kept coming, ordinary, persistent, a kind of steady that felt like the shape of what would come next. The family group chat went nuclear in a way that was almost predictable, like watching a storm I knew had formed for years finally hit. My phone buzzed and buzzed, messages stacked up like broken plates. "You tore us apart," one cousin wrote. "You could have handled this quietly," another said. An aunt called me and sobbed about reputation and loyalty until I let it go to voicemail. I saved everything, screenshots, voicemails, messages, dropping them into the folder I kept like a ledger of truth. I replied once in the main thread, "I handled it honestly." Then I muted the conversation and refused to be baited into 50 tiny arguments that would do nothing but scatter energy. The uglier stuff started slipping into private messages. Someone from a branch of the family I barely knew sent an anonymous text, "There will be payback." I screenshotted it, archived it, and forwarded it to my backup folder. Daphne messaged privately, "I didn't know." I sent her the audio file of Mom's admission. She opened it and then went silent for a long, cold minute before replying with a single, shaky "oh." That silence said more than any argument. A cousin posted vague statuses about snakes in the family, and another tried to justify Grandma by painting Mom as harmless. I didn't engage, I documented. There were calls from relatives who said I'd humiliated the family, that I should have called and smoothed it over. One aunt lectured me about forgiveness like it was a coverall bandage. I thought forgiveness doesn't mean letting harm repeat. I saved the lecture in my folder, too. Mark held me when the waves of messages hit, and Ivy would come by with a quiet look as if to measure whether we were still standing. I was tired, angry, and oddly steady. The noise couldn't touch the thing that mattered most, that my daughter's future wasn't collateral in Mom's games. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. It was Dad, looking smaller somehow, like a man who'd been told to go make up something he couldn't. He stood on my porch with his hat in his hands, a little out of breath. "Tessa," he said, no flourish, no loud voice. "We need to talk." I opened the door and put one foot outside, keeping the threshold between us as a small, literal line. He asked for Mom, said she was fragile, and tried the old line, "It was a mistake. Can't we fix this without all the public fuss?" His voice wobbled where it had never wobbled before. He asked me to call the detective, to write a letter, to do something that would make the problem go away. Then he put it bluntly, "Could you help us this month? We need $1,200. Just this once." He looked like a man asking for a life jacket. I could see the plea, and for a second I felt the muscle memory of years where I patched and smoothed and paid, but I wasn't that girl anymore. I set my jaw and said calmly, "No." He leaned in, voice tight, and said, "You'll regret cutting us off." I answered, "Regret is a poor budget tool, Dad. I'm not going to fund more damage." He called me heartless. I said I was careful. The words landed like doorstops. He stayed for a few minutes, trying guilt and pleading and the old rehearsed stories about family. I let him say it all. Then he left, closing the screen door with a soft, angry click that felt like a lock. Within weeks, a for sale sign appeared in their front yard as permanently as a thunderhead. My cousin texted that stopping the money had forced the sale. I thought instead that the truth had made the ground move. Dad started pushing the group chat for help with moving costs. I didn't reply. He asked the family for small loans. I didn't answer. I sat at my kitchen table and renamed the savings account the money had gone into, writing Ivy Scholarship on the ledger where I tracked the transfers. Every month going forward would be money toward her life, not repairs for other people's harm. Mom's old friends messaged with fury and threats, "You'll be sorry when she's gone," as if the house was more sacred than my daughter. Daphne, in a quieter message, asked if I'd consider a small loan to tide them over. I typed "no loans, no gifts, no more," and sent it. The house was packed in boxes, and strangers came and went to look at the rooms where we'd left our secrets. It felt right to see their history being boxed up, to know the walls that protected lies were about to belong to someone else. For the first time since the mall, I slept through the night, no adrenaline, no half-wake planning. It was a small mercy and a hard-earned one. The hearing for Ivy was simple in setup but heavy in feeling. We sat in a plain room with a table, 3 water glasses, and a small panel, Corinne Doyle in the center, the coordinator, and 2 other adults who listened like people who made decisions for kids who'd worked hard to do the right thing. My hands were steady when I placed Nolan Reeves's signed letter on the table. It was a plain sheet that said what needed saying. The alarm went off because the tag hadn't been removed. The video shows contact with the backpack. I slid copies of the audio and the video's timestamps across the table, too, everything labeled, everything short. Corinne read them once, then set the paper down and looked at Ivy. "Tell us, in your words, what happened," she said. Ivy stood and read from a small sheet of paper she'd written herself. Her voice was clear. She said she'd been with Mom and Dad, that she hadn't put anything in her bag, and that she'd been detained at the exit when the alarm went off. She said she loved the program and wanted to keep her place. She didn't sound bitter or angry. She sounded like someone who had learned the value of facts over feelings. The panel thanked her for coming in calmly and for letting them see the evidence without pressure. They told us they'd reviewed the audio and the manager's letter and that the items were consistent. After a short private discussion, they announced the decision: Ivy would remain in the program. They noted her restraint and recommended she continue in training with a commendation for handling herself under stress. When the door opened afterward, Ivy laughed, short and shaky, and we all let out a breath we hadn't known we'd been holding for days. We celebrated with takeout, folding boxes of food on our kitchen table like a tiny victory feast. She looked at me and said, matter of fact, people deserve someone who won't flinch. I felt overwhelming pride and a quiet, fierce relief that her future was still hers to choose. Daphne asked to meet me in a small coffee shop 2 weeks after the hearing. She looked smaller than usual, like she'd lost the padding that came from being wrapped in Mom's chaos. She ordered tea and stirred it without looking up. For a long minute, we both sat with the cups between us, the steam fogging a little in the late afternoon light. Finally, she said, I have to tell you something I haven't said out loud since I was a kid. She told me about a girl named Jen, a classmate from high school. Mom had me slip a bracelet into Jen's locker, Daphne said, voice thin. She taught me how to do it, how to make it look like the other girl was the one who took it. Then Mom told the story to everyone until they believed it. The words were small and terrible. I could see the memory in her face, the embarrassed laugh turned guilty, the way she waited for approval. I thought that was normal, she added, almost a whisper, as if saying it louder would make it wrong. I didn't reach for the folder or wave proof at her. I just listened. Daphne's admission wasn't a confession to make me triumphant. It was a crack in the old house of excuses. When she put the details out there, something in her loosened. I'm done defending what I know is wrong, she said, then looked up as if surprised she'd said it. We sat for a long time after that, talking about how Mom shaped the stories in the family and how that shaped us. Daphne didn't want headlines. She didn't want the drama. She wanted to stop carrying the weight of someone else's show. I told her I wasn't looking for revenge, I wanted change. She nodded and said she'd be honest if anyone asked. She didn't hug me, but she left with the look of someone who'd taken a step away from a cliff. When she walked out, I added her statement to my folder not as a weapon to swing, but as a record of what had been done and what had to stop. It felt less like leverage and more like history. The truth kept working even when it was quiet. People started to understand in their own small ways that the family's neat stories had a lot of stitches coming undone. A week later, Dad called from a number I didn't recognize. He sounded thin and practiced, like someone reading from an old play. Tessa, he said, Mom's lawyer asked if you'd write a character letter. If you do that, maybe we can make this go away. No arrests, no headlines, just a little help to put things back. He went on about family, about saving face. He even offered to have Mom apologize somewhere private if I'd just write a sentence or two about her character. For a hot second, the old reflexes in me burned, the ones that would have reached for the glue to mend the family picture. Then I looked over at Ivy, who was at the table grading flashcards, eyes narrowed in study. I thought about the look on her face at the mall, the hard breath she taught herself to take, and the future she wanted. No letters, I said into the phone, every word steady. No lies. I won't save her from a lesson she wrote herself. Dad tried the old lines again. Family first, he said, that old shield like a club. I answered, truth first. He begged, he threatened regret, he tried to bargain. I shut the door on every angle. I blocked the new number after the call and then went into the office and wrote a single sentence in my journal. I did not flinch. It felt like carving a line in the sand. That night, Mom's lawyer called once more, polite and urgent. He left a message that was heavy with suggestion. Why not help a woman who'd always been so giving? But I didn't return the call. I poured a cup of tea, sat with Ivy for a few minutes while she packed her bag for practice and kissed her forehead. My choice was quiet and final. It was the kind of answer that doesn't beg for applause, it just is. The criminal part of the story moved slowly, but the end came in a plain courtroom with a small wooden bench and a worn flag. Mom admitted to the small shoplifting charge and to giving a false statement. Her lawyer worked the usual pleas, but there was no made-up story to protect her this time. The judge gave her a sentence that included a short stay in county and a requirement to attend a program for shoplifting and to stay away from Mallory for a time. It wasn't a spectacle, it was a consequence. Without the monthly support, the house couldn't stay afloat. A for sale sign went up in the yard, then a realtor's lockbox on the front door. Relatives who had been quick with the family over strangers line suddenly became quiet when the house was photographed and the rooms shown to potential buyers. People who only wanted the old piece drifted away, calls became less frequent, visits stopped, and the group chat that had burned hottest cooled to cold silence. Mark and I renamed the small savings line in our budget from parents to Ivy scholarship. It felt like a small act of justice, putting those dollars toward a college fund and not toward covering someone else's pattern of harm. We took a weekend after the hearings were done and did nothing remarkable. We slept late, walked the dog without looking at our phones, and made scrambled eggs. The house felt softer without the constant low hum of tension. I cleaned the folder on my desktop like someone folding a suit after a funeral. I kept the audio files, the manager's letter, and a short note about Daphne's admission in a labeled folder I called Family Record. I archived the rest. Some things needed to be kept as history, not as weapons. My rule now was simple: compassion with boundaries beats loyalty without truth. I believed it like a new religion. Weeks later, we hosted another Sunday lunch, but this time at our house. The sound was different, laughter that didn't have a sharp edge, stories that weren't rehearsed to hide something. Ivy put her Police Explorer binder down on the table and smiled without scanning the room for landmines. She passed a bowl of mashed potatoes to Mark with the kind of casual grace that felt like recovery. At one point, I caught my face in the microwave door as Mark reached for the gravy boat. My hair was a little more gray than I remembered, and the lines at the corners of my eyes had won a new kind of mapping. I looked tired, sure, and okay with both. The memory of that other Sunday, the knock, the cuffs, the silence after, floated near the surface of my mind like a storm cloud that had finally moved off. I traded that image for this one. My daughter reaching for seconds, unafraid. I sat back and watched them. Ivy was small against the table, but her presence filled the room. I whispered, barely loud enough for the dogs in the next room to hear, "We're safe," and meant it in a way I might not have understood before. The house that used to shelter secrets now held a different kind of warmth. If you've ever been the one to speak the truth in a house built on silence, tell me where you are, city and country, in the comments. Share your story if you've had to choose boundaries over comfort. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more first-person stories about holding fast to what's right. There's another story coming that might be the one you needed to hear today.